Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 12-fight card for UFC 312 going down in Australia on Saturday night. Prelims at 6 p.m., main card at 10 Eastern. And if you'd like to tail some of the bets that we discussed today on this show, make sure to find the quick slip link in the podcast and video description or go to actionnetwork.com/betnow to find all the quick slips for the bets we discuss in this show. The main event, Dricus du Plessis, minus 210, Sean Strickland, plus 170. This fight is about minus 160 to minus 180 to go to a decision. The last time these two fought, I believe it was last February at UFC 297, the fight was plus 220 to go to a decision, and the money line was a pick'em, closed minus 108, minus 110 on either side. Seeing after a split decision, the line adjusts so drastically towards the du Plessis side. The line adjusts even more drastically towards the go to decision prop, about a 33% adjustment in implied probability in the finish market there. Now, Strickland landed more strikes in the first fight, 173 to 137 on total strikes, on significant strikes, 157 to 81 on head strikes. But Strickland throwing out a lot of jabs, throwing out a lot of teep kicks, a lot of rangefinders, not sitting down on any of his punches, not landing many power punches, everything du Plessis throwing with power. And when du Plessis was moving forward, he was winning the fight. A little bit tentative early in round one, sort of battling, neutralizing one another in the center of the cage. Strickland able to dictate with the jab. But rounds 2, 3, and 4, du Plessis started amping up the pressure, mixing in the takedowns, landing body kicks, throwing head kicks. And as he was mixing in the takedowns, he was creating more openings for his strikes up top. Landed 3 or 4 head kicks throughout the fight. Strickland ate them pretty well, but could see one of them putting him out in a rematch. And the biggest difference we have in analysis, aside from seeing the fight play out, but the difference we have relative to the first fight and our analysis, du Plessis had never been in a 5-round fight before. The first time they fought, it was expected that Strickland would take over down the stretch, win the 4th and 5th rounds. Well, du Plessis has now won the 4th round in consecutive fights, defeated Strickland in the 4th round. It was probably the best round he had in the fight. Shot 5 takedowns in that round. Came out a little bit tired for the 5th round. I think it's because he exerted the most energy that he did throughout the fight in that 4th round. And then up 2-1 against Adesanya, got the 4th round submission there as well. So think Strickland probably is a higher probability of winning the 5th round than du Plessis does. But I give du Plessis a bigger chance of winning the 1st round than he did in the first fight when Strickland took that opening frame. Just because I think du Plessis was a little bit tentative. Now that they've seen each other, know each other's tendencies, I think du Plessis be a bit more aggressive from the outset. So the adjustment to me is justified. I think du Plessis does win about 70% of the minutes anytime these guys fight. I think Strickland can win 2 rounds pretty comfortably, finding a third, not pretty comfortably, but 2 competitive rounds I think he can take. Finding a 3rd competitive round for him to steal is drawing a little bit thin against the guy with the big power advantage. Du Plessis to me the likelier finisher. However, the finish-only market, he's lined at about minus 340. I'd project him north of minus 400, so there is technically quantifiable value there. I'm going to pass, though. I'm going to take advantage of the adjustment on du Plessis to win inside the distance. It was about plus 130 for the first fight. It's plus 215 for the rematch here. That's as high as I got. As low as plus 175. He's plus 380 by knockout, plus 750 by submission. Those were plus 250 and plus 500, respectively, for the first fight. I still think he's the guy with more finishing upside. I thought that going into the first fight. The idea was Dricus early or Strickland late going into the first matchup. I still think Dricus early finishing upside. Like him to win inside the distance more than the odds suggest. Not necessarily would be my read if you just gave me a free bet on the fight. But Dricus ITD plus 215 would take that at plus 200 or better. Just a small bet, nothing substantial for me. Billy, you're going to wait for some live bets on either side of this fight. Curious to hear how you're interested in betting this, because we did see du Plessis win that 4th round in the last fight. Give me your approach for live betting this fight based on how the early rounds play out.
Well, first off, every part of me wants to bet Strickland at plus 180 or so, because they both won 2 rounds pretty clearly, and they had a contested 3rd round that I thought was rightfully judged to DDP, but would not care, would not argue, would not fight you if you said the opposite. Like, it was as close to a 50-50 round as I've seen in a long time. And then they're about the same age. Like, DDP is a little bit younger, but it's not significant. So, like, every part of my brain is screaming at me to bet Sean Strickland. I just can't do it pre-fight. I've heard a lot of people say that Strickland's style is so unique, and you could probably say this about DDP too, but that after sparring him a couple times, you can figure him out a little bit, and it's a lot harder the first time just because nobody marches forward that whole time just pitter-pattering. Like, nobody else does that. And guys feel like once they've seen it, especially for 25 minutes, they tend to do a little bit better. Not that we have, I don't think any rematches in Sean Strickland's resume right now that I can think of off the top of my head, but he fought for a long time. So could be wrong there. Anyway, in terms of the live stuff, basically I'm looking for whoever wins the first round and how they win it, just taking the other side. It seemed like every time DDP wrestled in the first fight, he won that round, but then he lost the next one. Like, it obviously took a toll on him cardio-wise when he wrestled. Strickland wasn't giving him the takedowns easily. DDP was getting him, but he had to work pretty hard. And then you could kind of see that pullback the next round after that. So if DDP comes out, grapples the first round, wins it clearly, we'll probably get plus 280, plus 300, something like that on Strickland. And then he probably wins that round, and you can come back on DDP at maybe not plus money, but enough that you can arbitrage it. And then if Strickland comes out, DDP doesn't wrestle in round one, odds are he's going to come out and wrestle in round two, so you take the other side. So my goal here is to just build a portfolio of 2 or possibly more bets where I make a profit either way, no matter who wins the fight. That's what I'm shooting for. My general thesis is DDP wins rounds where he wrestles, but then he probably loses the next one just because of that cardio drain. And he's a guy who, walks around 30 or 40 pounds heavier than this. So it's a lot. It's a lot of effort. Strickland's not easy to take down. I kind of get why that happens, and I think we're going to see that happen again.
Yeah, big reason the cardio aspect, the breathing aspect for DDP was such a thing going to the first fight. Earlier in his career, he had a septum issue that caused him to breathe like very dramatically loud throughout the entirety of his fights, even from the opening round. He had that fixed prior to his fight against Robert Whittaker, showed better cardio against Whittaker, finished him, and then showed surprisingly good cardio in the fight against Strickland. So I think the gas tank holds up better than people expected it to. I think now that he has some 5-round experience, probably knows how to manage it a little bit better. 2, I do like DDP this weekend. I think he is the rightful winner, and I do think Strickland is ultimately going to prove to be a value trap coming off of that split loss. Billy, I agree with you. I think the longer you fight Strickland or the more you see that style, the more success opponents are going to have against him. That first round, just going back and watching it, seeing DDP get his eye swelled up from that jab, not really like pushing forward as aggressively as he needed to. Rounds 2, 3, and 4, he started blitzing, lunging in a little bit more. And those movements, those aggressive like explosions, the takedown attempts, all of them served to drive Strickland back towards the fence. And when Strickland was moving backward, the jab wasn't nearly as effective, and he had no other answers for DDP offensively. So I do think DDP's forward pressure shuts down Strickland's offense for 65 to 70% of the fight, and that's ultimately what gets him to keep the title, potentially finishes the fight. I really think those head kicks were getting close in the first matchup, and I think he can land one of those and finish the fight here. Any thoughts with regard to the goes the distance or the ends inside the distance, given the price adjustment for the first fight before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I like your DDP inside the distance argument. I was going to say, though, real quick before we move on, DDP kind of had the same game plan against Adesanya, where if you look back at the stats, he landed 3 takedowns in the second round, and the third round was Izzy's best round. So there's definitely like a pattern of DDP doing that. I don't think he finishes Strickland on the ground just because Strickland is so solid defensively down there, which makes me think goes to decision is probably the sharper side if you're picking that without attaching a fighter to it. But yeah, I don't hate the DDP inside the distance. Kind of hoping we get a better price just because we've seen Strickland finish like once at middleweight, and it was kind of fluky, so it's hard to bet on that.
Yeah, lost to Alex Pereira. That left hook sent him somersaulting backward. I believe he has one of their loss aside from that via finish. And it's not as though the first fight was particularly close to finishing, but I do think Strickland was getting hit in the head much more than he normally does. He relies on the shoulder roll, but he moves his head straight back and doesn't move it side to side. He just sort of leans back to get out of the way of strikes. And when you're dodging head punches, I think it's a lot easier to get out of the way the DDP exploding in and throwing those head kicks up. He was getting much closer to the target. Those, I really do think one of those is going to potentially land and wobble Strickland badly in this fight. Let's move on to the co-main event. Women's strawweight title bout between Weili Zhang, currently about plus 102, and Tatiana Suarez at minus 122. Zhang opened about minus 195 here, current champion. Suarez opened around plus 150, 40% implied. Her money line has moved towards about minus 120, minus 125, more than 10%, 15% in implied probability relative to where it opened. Now, a few years ago, Billy, I'm really curious as to who you would bet in this fight. I'm assuming, based on the version of Tatiana Suarez that we've seen come back in 2023, who then had to take more time off due to more injuries, you didn't see the Tatiana Suarez, the peak Tatiana Suarez that we saw earlier in her career when it seemed like she was a surefire UFC champion. Her wrestling seems like it's a bit different relative to everybody else in these women's divisions. Seeing collegiate wrestling get pushed forward for women, I think we're going to see an era of potentially dominant American wrestlers in these female divisions win belts. Maybe Tatiana Suarez is a sliding door moment for the start of that era, not as though she was able to benefit from these, new scholarships and new implementation of women's wrestling at the collegiate level. But I do think Tatiana Suarez can control this fight via the grappling. I think it's fairly binary because if she doesn't, I think Zhang can catch her on the feet. You're going with the Zhang side. I'm on the Suarez side. Curious where you bet Zhang. And then I also want to know your thoughts regarding the total, because this is about minus 150 to end inside the distance. And then I also want to know if this fight were 5 years ago, if you would have bet Suarez.
All right, so lots to unpack there. First thing, I forget what the fight was 2 weeks ago, but we saw the price go way up and then dip back down and then up again. And I know we were on the opposite side.
Was it the Grad Alexander fight?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it almost reminds me of that because Weili got as high as like plus 115 at some places before coming back down. I would only bet either woman in this fight as it stands now at plus money. I got plus 105 at Zhang. Even money, I'd still be with her. The problem that I saw is when Suarez came back, she relied super heavily on a guillotine, and the first one was horrible. Like, it was a one-arm guillotine that Andrade tapped to, where, like, I would yell at my 7-year-old for tapping to that, and I couldn't believe someone did it in a high-level UFC fight. Second one was a little bit better. I hate falling to your back for a guillotine in an MMA fight. It's one thing in jiu-jitsu or whatever else, but Zhang is not going to tap to you jumping guillotine. Like, she's going to defend that appropriately. I see Zhang with a very clear striking edge, Suarez with a very clear wrestling edge, but it's going to be close once it actually gets to the mat. Like, we've seen Zhang get taken down by Yan Xiaonan and then dominate the grappling once it gets there. That's what I think is really going to decide it. On top of, Suarez missed 2 fights last year with a knee injury, although the one in December seems a little bit questionable that she was actually hurt. If they then put her in this one, maybe they were just saying that because they needed a title fight. I don't know. Either way, had a significant knee injury at some point in 2024. And I don't think she's ever been 5 rounds. So we talk about it a lot with grapplers, or wrestlers, I should say, not grapplers in general, that doing that over an extended period is a lot harder than striking over an extended period. So I think if it does go late, it probably favors Weili. But yeah, I'm with you. If it, honestly, not even 5 years ago, just if I was confident she was healthy really at any point, I'd probably be on the Suarez side. You just can't ever really say that. And even if she's fully healthy now, how long has she been fully healthy? What's the cardio going to be like in her first 5-round fight? Is she going to be able to push the pace the whole way? So that's how I see it for Weili. I'm not super confident in it. I actually think this is the far more intriguing of the 2 title fights because almost no outcome here would surprise me. Like, if I woke up Sunday morning and you told me what happened, I would not be shocked in any method, time, or winner. But yeah, if I'm getting plus money on one of the more dominant champions in recent memory against a similarly aged fighter who's had injuries and layoffs, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I think where we disagree is how competitive the grappling is going to be once it actually hits the mat. We both agree Suarez is the better wrestler, likelier to get it to the mat. Weili's never had good takedown defense either. But to me, Weili also gets stuck on her back for extended stretches. The fights with Rose Namajunas, I think those were a great example of 2 fighters who are much better offensively grappling than they are defensively, because anytime either of them ended up on top, the other was not able to get out from bottom on the other. So to me, Wiley has always been a much better offensive grappler than she is defensively. Her out-grappling Yan Xiaonan after being taken down doesn't really do anything for me. Yan is a boxer. This is a completely different level going up against Tatiana Suarez. My concern is what you mentioned, the 5-round factor, the fact that Tatiana has never been to the championship rounds. But again, Zhang, when she gets grappled, I do think she tends to tire out much more quickly than when she's striking. So I had significant pause, Billy, about betting Suarez with that 5-round question mark, with the championship round question mark. I think if Suarez is winning and covering her money line, she likely finishes this thing before it even gets to the championship rounds. As a result, the under 3.5 rounds is pretty interesting, because if she's not having success wrestling, she's probably going to get knocked out on the feet, or at least hurt very drastically. And then Suarez either inside the distance or by submission at plus 260. She's going to chain those submission attempts together. She's going to try for guillotines, as Billy mentioned, but she's going to look to finish this fight inside the distance and via submission within the first few rounds. Maybe a better bet at plus money than taking her money line. Billy, did you have any thoughts regarding the total before we move on from this one?
Not so much the total, because I'm on Wiley, but if I had the read that I thought Suarez was going to do well, then the under is kind of a better, like if you're getting under 3.5 at a better price than Suarez money line, that feels pretty obvious. Just it gives you more outs and covers the likeliest Suarez win. Really like Suarez sub though. Like I think if she wins, that's kind of likelier how it's going to be. I just don't see her winning an extended fight. So I might even, add a little sprinkle on Suarez sub just to cover my Wiley money line here. But yeah, the 3.5, if you're on the Suarez side, I think is the better pick with the current lines. If you got Suarez at a better price, shout out to you, but that's not there anymore. So I really like your point on the under 3.5.
Yeah, plus 102, plus 105 even on the under 3.5 you can get currently. I agree with you. I think this is the more intriguing fight. This is the most interesting fight on the card for me. I wish it got its own buildup, frankly, and I wish it was a main event, soloing a main event. I doubt they could have sold too many pay-per-views, with these fighters and the buildup that they gave it. But this is an extremely interesting fight, and like I said, a potential sliding doors moment for women's MMA with the future of American wrestling potentially on the horizon. The pipeline of female wrestlers who are going to get into MMA, I think, is going to grow exponentially in the next 4 or 5 years. Let's move on to our
big news at my house. I was going to say, big news at my house when we got D1 women's wrestling with my 7-year-old daughter who loves to wrestle. So that was big. I'm hoping she can follow that Suarez path. Not that I ever wanted to do MMA, but let's just go grapple.
Maybe we'll be talking about one of her collegiate wrestling fights on this podcast one day. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs for this weekend. There's a number of underdogs on the main card I like. Not too many on the prelims I'm interested in. A couple I'm going to talk about here. Justin Tafa at plus 135 on the money line by KO at plus 180. He's going against Talion Teixeira, who's 7 inches taller, has a 9-inch reach advantage. He's also 6 years younger. But Teixeira is a grappler. Tafa, the better striker. Tafa, much more durable. And I think he has better cardio if this fight extends to. He's 5-5 in the UFC. Those wins haven't aged particularly well, but he has beaten UFC level competition. Teixeira has mostly fought cans, has not been in extended fights. And I think most importantly here, he pulled out of a December fight against Lucas Brzeski on an Alexander Pantoja undercard, so on a Brazilian undercard with an injury. And the UFC said, okay, great, you can now go to Australia and fight an Aussie who hits really freaking hard. A much tougher fight, in my opinion, than the Brzeski fight. Brzeski is just a cardio kickboxer. I think Teixeira would have been able to take him down, would have been able to survive in the striking, even if he got hit. Here, I don't think he survives in the striking if he gets hit. He can win via grappling. He can win via submission, and I think rather quickly. But he can get caught at range as well, and Tafa capable of putting anybody down. So Tafa by KO plus 180, probably a better bet than the money line at plus 135, but I don't think he has bad cardio, and I won't be shocked if he wins the decision between these two, considering he has 15-minute experience. And then Jimmy Crute at plus 136, very similar price, but the inside the distance for Crute at plus 380. Going against Rodolfo Bellato, 1 inch shorter, 3-inch reach discrepancy, but he should have the grappling upside in this fight. I'm just worried about his mental state. He took some time off to deal with mental health issues. He clearly seemed broken in the cage mentally last time we saw him against Alonzo Metafield. He seemed broken after other losses too. He's taking some extra time off. Don't love betting a guy coming back who seems kind of waffling back and forth on whether he wants to continue fighting in MMA. But this is a huge step down in competition relative to his recent opponents. And not only can he grab a Bellato, I don't think Bellato has a good chin either. I could see them just swinging and one of them getting caught and it basically being a 50-50 brawl. So Bellato, again, plus 136, or sorry, Crute plus 136 on the money line, inside the distance at plus 380. Billy, you've got a couple underdogs you like as well. But before you get there, any thoughts on Tafa and Jimmy Crute?
Yeah, Crute inside the distance at plus 380 at a fight that's like, what, minus 250 to end inside the distance is insane. Like, I haven't done the math exactly, but that's not how that should work. So,
yeah,
definitely going to tail that one.
Yeah, I think it's off.
Like, I don't understand. But regardless, yeah, take that, jump on that one. I'm with you in that the outside factors have me not wanting to bet on Crute straight up, but when you can get inside the distance of that. I did the full fight preview. I don't know if it's up yet for Tafa versus Teixeira. What I did was Tafa by first round KO specifically at plus 380, and then also Teixeira's money line. Tafa has never won a fight that's gone out of the first round. He's never won a fight by anything other than knockout. He's fighting like a tall, gangly dude who he should be able to find his chin early. The one thing I think that helps Teixeira here is it's the full UFC pay-per-view cage. And for a big guy, we see a lot of big, tall guys who don't use it well. He actually uses it really well on the feet. He keeps that range well. So if Tafa throws a few bombs early in the fight, they don't land. I think Teixeira takes over after that. So that's my thought. If we get a Tafa first round knockout, I make money. If Teixeira wins at any point, I make money. So, yeah, that's how I'm viewing that one. My favorite bet still, even though the line has came down since Monday, is Colby Slickness Thickness at, I think, plus 295 is the best line now. I got plus 350. He's fighting Alexandre Topuria, and instead of being plus 350, if Topuria's last name was Smith, he'd be like maybe plus 150 just because it came in on short notice. If you look at these guys' resumes, Thickness is by far the better prospect. He's undefeated. He's fought like 4 guys with winning records. He's got a regional title in Australia, which has a tough regional scene. Topuria has mostly fought cans. Only one of his opponents has a winning record, and he's been knocked out. Doesn't seem to have great cardio. Like, if you watch some of his fights, he's very aggressive early, but doesn't really have a plan B. I don't think Thickness is a guy that you can just run over right away. And it's pure, like, nepotism. The market caught on to that and pushed it down a little bit. And it's also kind of a, like, proxy rematch between Volkanovski and Topuria, because Volkanovski trains with and will be cornering Thickness in Australia, got the hometown behind him. I'd be even more confident if it weren't short notice for Thickness. He's stepping in for Cody Haddon. My logic, though, is if you are a 7-0 Australian prospect and they're coming to Sydney, you just get ready like you have a fight anyway, because the odds of getting called up for that are fairly high. So I'm hoping he's in good shape. Those guys always seem to be. Can't believe the line we're getting on that just because of the last name. And then the other one, Tom Nolan, was plus 125. I think you can still find that some places, maybe on Friday. I'd take him at any plus money against Slava Claus. I think at worst, this is just a brawl between 2 guys, and we've seen Slava Claus's chin start to deteriorate a little bit. Nolan a little bit more skilled, a little bit less aggressive. Best case scenario, he uses those skills and his height and stays at range and picks them apart. Worst case, we're flipping a coin on a brawl where one guy's older and has been hurt a little bit recently. So I like Tom Nolan, wouldn't take him as a favorite. See what the best line you can get as you're hearing this is.
Yeah,
Nolan. So thoughts on Thickness and Topuria, though. I really want to hear how you're viewing that one.
So no bet for me. I'm really excited for Ilia Topuria and Alexander Volkanovski to be in opposing corners for that fight, kind of like a pseudo rematch via their trainees, training partners, I guess. Ilia took some time off to help his brother prep for this fight. I don't really have much of a read on his brother's skill set. I mean, there's not much recent tape on his fights. He's clearly hasn't fought very high level competition either. The fact that he trains with his brother, I think, is probably a decent sign. But, you know, a lot of Ilya's game is predicated on his explosiveness and athleticism. So I don't know how much of that is in his brother. Like, Ilya, just relative to his size, swings hammers. He has just like this naturally God-given power in his hands. And not only that, but he also has like the fast twitch muscle and the speed to dart in and out of the pocket and to move around the cage. So it's really tough to tell, where his brother's athleticism and explosiveness and power is relative to the bantamweight champion of the world, and maybe the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. But yeah, I think, given all those factors, given the unknown, given the unlikelihood that both him and his brother are, top 1% athletes, I think thickness is probably the side. You have to think when you're betting into unknowns, and we'll get to, or I should say, we'll get to it a little bit more with our best bet, because I actually think there's betting into unknowns there that are directionally correct for taking a plus money shot. I think the unknowns here are also directionally correct for betting into a plus money shot. I think Topuria's upside is already baked into the line, and I think thickness is, and I think like the name value is baked into the line. I think everything else you said, Billy, if you gave him the name Smith, if you just looked at their resumes, what is the line? And for that reason, I think it's probably incorrect, but also this was plus 350 earlier in the week. You got a much better number. It seems to have settled in now that it's below that 3-1 threshold. I probably wouldn't jump in on at this point pre-fight, because I'm worried about thickness just getting finished quick by what could be an explosive athlete. But if thickness is still there after round one, I'm probably live betting him against the guy who his brother showed, in his UFC debut. He gassed out a little bit in round 3. Granted, that was on short notice against Yusuf Zalal. Topuria is the one who got rescheduled here. Thickness taking the fight on short notice in place of Cody Haddon. But I know a lot of people were really excited about Cody Haddon's chances against Topuria. I'm just wondering if some of that love for Haddon has maybe bled over to wanting to bet thickness against Topuria. So it's a pass for me. But I wanted to analyze, like, when you're betting into unknowns, and betting into unknowns can be great because that's where value probably lies. You just want to be directionally correct in terms of the unknown that you're betting into. And I think it's almost like certain that this line, if anything, is likely overinflated towards the favorite. Before we get to our top props, just want to make sure that out there the stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and the many prop bets to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription, because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time, quick pick alerts from experts like Super Bowl prop master Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon. I saw Kerner firing more props into the Action Hour app this morning. All the tools you need to turn profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB. That's $40 off for the full year, so be covered for the Super Bowl, UFC cards, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL seasons. Don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off of Action Pro. And hopefully we can win you money to cover the rest of that subscription with our top props of the night and some plus money plays. We are in alignment on one prop in particular. That's Cody Steele by submission at plus 380. Billy, I want to let you talk about this fight a little bit more in depth, because you also like Steele on the money line as well. But we just see a grappling advantage for Steele here, a competition black belt, making his UFC debut. I think we both view this guy as a pretty high-level prospect, and we like him to get a finish in his opening fight.
Yeah, the market is just screwed up here because he didn't get any takedowns on the Contender Series. As you pointed out, high-level competition black belt. He won Combat Jiu-Jitsu Worlds before transitioning to MMA, which for those that don't know, it's a jiu-jitsu match, but when it's on the ground, we can slap each other. And it looks kind of silly, but it's actually like a really good translation to MMA, because you're not, inverting yourself, rolling for leg locks when the guy's dropping hammer slaps on you. So, I actually really like that as a progression step for him. He's grappled every high-level black belt that you've heard of, if you follow that at all. Usually not beat the best of the best guys, but done really well. He didn't get any takedowns on the Contender Series. He tried a couple. They didn't work. Still won by knockout, which is a good sign, but a concerning sign against a powerful puncher in Rong Zhu. What people don't realize, on the Contender Series, he fought a Division I wrestler. And now he's fighting a Chinese fighter who got taken down 6 times on 2 road to the UFC fights. So it's a super clear advantage this time. This feels like one of those, just grab it this fight, because it's not going to remain there moving forward. People just don't realize that that's what he does. He's really good at it. And we just got a twisted view of that because of the matchup he had on the Contender Series, which he still did really well in, but he won by knockout instead of a submission, which gave people the wrong idea.
Yeah, 4 career losses by submission for Rong Zhu as well. Regional losses, Chinese MMA losses via submission. Probably not a good sign against the guy who is a high-level competition black belt. You previously gave out Tafa round 1 KO at plus 380. I may switch to that instead of the Tafa money line, or I may just add some of that, in round robin tickets. I'm still figuring out how to bet the Crute and the Tafa fights. I think they're both the value sides. I'm not in love with betting either. Again, we're going to get to an underdog in our best specs section that we both really like. The other 2 contrarian plus money props that stood out to me as potential bets, the Topuria thickness fight goes to decision at plus 240, which certainly lends itself to the thickness side of the money line. And then the Slava Nolan fight goes to decision at plus 250. That both fights, I should say, are over 1.5s as opposed to over 2.5s. The Slava fight is minus 120 over 1.5. The Topuria fight is minus 140. However, I think if those fights get over 1.5, they are likelier to go to a decision. And I would probably bet the plus money as opposed to laying juice on the over 1.5. So again, nothing I'm particularly in love with. They're both contrarian plays. Both fights are expected to envy a finish. I just think relative to the divisions these are in, which, the finish rates for these divisions are closer to 55%, and the market is telling you it's closer to 65%. So there's definitely a slight edge on both fights to go to a decision. If you hit one of them, you obviously turn a profit. We'll see if I end up betting one, both, or neither. Just wanted to point those out as potential value props for this weekend. Just an 11-fight card, or just the 12-fight card. So not a ton necessarily on the board. Billy, any more props before we move on to our best bets?
No, I really like the 2 you gave out because they both, I think, correlate pretty heavily with the underdogs in those fights winning, which I'm betting. So, especially in Nolan Slava, given the line movement on Nolan, if I hadn't bet Nolan earlier in the week, I think I would probably tell you on that. But I just think there's enough correlation, and I got a decent price on Nolan earlier. So, but yeah, I hope you hit both of those because it probably means I hit both of the underdogs that I like.
Yeah, the Nolan Borshev fight could be a potential banger. Borshev is really technical. Nolan is just bigger and hits harder. I could see like a very slow-paced technical fight playing out, and then Nolan cracks Borshev with a huge shot, or I could see Slava landing like a huge body shot that puts Nolan down. So the pace of that fight scares me a little bit, just because I think they could go very fast. I think they could go very slow, and then somebody could just land a huge punch, and then the fight. So that GTD bothers me a little bit. The Topuria fight, like I said, betting into the unknowns a little bit. There was another fight too that I had. The heavyweight fight. I think the heavyweight fight over 1.5 at plus money as well. Tafa and Teixeira. I think that could be a sneaky over too. Tafa is super durable. Teixeira, we haven't seen finished. I do think he's got a potentially compromised chin. I think the likeliest way that finishes is Tafa KO or Teixeira submission. But if those two strike it out, I think that could get over the 7.5 minute mark at plus money. Not something I'm probably betting, but do want to dissuade people potentially from betting the under there. I think that could be a trap at juice.
That one specifically, I think even more so fits your thing of if it goes over 1.5, it's going to decision though. Because especially with lower level heavyweights, they don't have the cardio to finish each other later in fights. We know submissions are harder later in fights when they're slippery. The power from both guys is going to be down. If we get halfway through the first round, there's going to be a lot of cage pushing and hugging along the wall. So I have zero interest in betting over 1.5, but I'll probably throw that goes to a decision in a silly round robin or something, just like the heavyweights we saw last week.
Yeah, the 3 fights I just said, if that one gets over the 1.5, I think that one is almost certainly going to decision. If there's a finish in that fight, I think it's quickly. I would actually prefer the fight ends in round 1 as opposed to the under 1.5, maybe even the under half a round as opposed to the under 1.5 rounds. I think if that one finishes, it's either Tafa first exchange or Teixeira takedown into immediate submission against the white belt. Let's get to our best bet on this card, an underdog that we've teased a couple times. We're also each going to give out a favorite that we like as well. But Francisco Prado at plus 200 against Jake Matthews. Now, Matthews has 14 wins in the UFC. He's been around the organization since 2014. his best win is Li Jingliang, who he knocked out. He beat a Diego Sanchez who retired or was cut subsequently. There's not a single other fighter among Jake Matthews' 12 remaining wins who I have a vivid memory of their UFC run, who had success in the UFC. This guy beats no-name guys, and anytime he takes any sort of step up in competition, he loses. Now, he has a grappling advantage here, probably. He has a 4-inch reach advantage. But Prado is 22. And what I love, he lost to Daniel Zellhuber in a fight of the night in Mexico City. Gassed out a little bit, but he was a little flabby at 155 pounds. Prado left his camp in Argentina and went to American Top Team. And now he looks absolutely shredded at 170 pounds. I think this guy found the best camp in the world, the right weight class for him. He's now training with actual training partners. I'm not sure who he's training with specifically, but I know Santiago Ponzinibbio, welterweight at ATT. Amasov is at ATT. I don't know if he's there or fighting in Ukraine, but there's a lot of bodies in that room for Francisco Prado. Jake Matthews runs his own gym. He trains with local dudes in Australia and his dad. That's why he's never made the necessary improvements to move up in level. I think Prado is the much better athlete in terms of durability and power. I think he's going to clip Matthews. I think he's going to put Matthews away. I don't even know if Matthews is going to get the takedowns if he wants them. I think Prado at 170 pounds may have significant strength and physicality advantages. I think he finishes Matthews potentially even in round one. Give me Prado on the money line at plus 200. By KO at plus 440. We'll take a look at some round one props as well. Billy, we're in alignment on Francisco Prado. This was going to be my best bet regardless. I was very excited when I went into our shared sheet and I saw you put Prado in as your best bet at 2-1 because I feel like I never see you take an underdog as your best bet. So we're in agreement on Francisco Prado here. I like it down to about plus 160. Give me your price target and tell me what I missed in terms of analyzing that fight.
Man, I might even go past plus one. Like my price target is something that's not going to happen in the market, so it's not. We don't even need to discuss. Like we're not going to see something that I wouldn't take it at. It's just a classic fight where I really like when we have an opportunity to project guys' progression, or for lack of a better term, in their career. He's 22. He's not cutting a ton of weight. He's not fighting at 10,000 feet above sea level in Mexico City where there's dirty air and cardio's rough. It's like every regression spot possible is all coalescing at once. I didn't even know he changed camps. That's a great point too. But just the weight class and the age. The weigh-ins were earlier this time. Dude looks great. Like I don't know if there's a special ATT supplement stack they have there, but he looks great. And from a stylistic standpoint, the one thing I will add is we have often seen Matthews struggle with the hyper aggressive athletic guys who just take it to him. The Matthew Semmelsberger fight was a perfect example of that. Semi was just on him and just a better athlete and kind of just out exploded him, for lack of a better term. Prado obviously has the ability to do that. As long as his cardio doesn't fall off a cliff late, I don't really see how it goes wrong for him. With that said, if Prado almost kills him through 2 rounds and you see a plus 1,000 on Jake Matthews or whatever, just for your own mental health, just go ahead and throw a quarter unit on that. If it gets crazy, because I'm not super worried about his cardio given the weight class and where his last fight was, but I'm a little bit worried about his cardio if he fights the kind of fight I think he should. So if you get that opportunity to just make your life more comfortable with a big plus money ticket on Matthews, go ahead and take it. Other than that, I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, I love that you didn't even know he changed camps because I was of a similar mindset. I was like, even the chubby lightweight moving up to 170 off of his previous fights, the power that he carries, the physicality that he has, I kind of liked Prado, previous version of Prado against Jake Matthews plus 200. Yeah, then exactly. I found out he went to ATT. I saw him on the scales and I was like, this guy went from chubby lightweight to shredded welterweight. Now, to your points about the cardio, carrying more weight, carrying more muscle, yes, he's in better shape, but there could be a trade-off there, right? He may be in better shape, moving up in weight class, but now he's carrying more weight on him. Maybe that tires him out for the 3rd round. You don't really know until you see it. But in terms of being directionally correct regarding progression, we both like Prado regardless of the camp switch. all of this stuff with the camp switch, I think upgrades his chances substantially. ATT is the best camp in the world. He looks like a physically different person than we saw a year ago. And that fight also took place in Mexico City. He was competitive with Zellhuber, who's a much bigger guy.
He won the first round.
Does not have the physical aspects, the physical tools that Zellhuber does. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'd say he won the first round against Zellhuber.
Yeah.
Like unanimously, I think.
And tired out. And I think he may have taken that fight on short notice too. I can't remember. But the Mexico City aspect, like it was expected that he would tire in round 2. And he did. And that's what cost him the fight. But one fight of the night, $50,000 bonus, got a $50K bonus. The fight before that probably was able to fund his move to the United States and his move to ATT and paying for camp there. And I think we're going to see a substantial progression from Francisco Prado. This guy's 22 years old. I think he is a serious prospect in this division now that he's moved camps to ATT. One other bet I want to give out at minus money, Gabe Santos at minus 225. Jack Jenkins is probably the most popular pick this week in terms of how I handicap these fights relative to the betting odds. People are picking Jenkins to win this fight 69% of the time on average, as high as 70%, 80% in some data samples that I pulled. Santos is a minus 220 money line favorite. Just does not compute in terms of how I handicap these fights out in terms of modeling the data that I have out there. Jenkins has been taken down by all of his UFC opponents, including Herbert Burns, and that was a bad look for me in particular because Burns is a good grappler. He is not a good wrestler. Gabe Santos is a much more powerful guy, a much better wrestler than Burns. I don't think Jenkins is going to give any resistance here to takedowns, and he tends to get stuck on his back once you take him down too. And on the feet, I think this is competitive at worst. I may even favor Santos in the striking as well, aside from Jenkins' leg kicks. So Santos on the money line, probably like him up to about minus 250. May even pair him with the money line favorite that you like, Cody Steele, who we also bet by submission at plus 380. But our best bets for this week, Francisco Prado, consensus on the money line at about plus 200, down to about plus 150. It won't get to a level that we don't like it. By KO for me at plus 440. And then Santos on the money line at minus 225. You're joining me on Prado plus 200. You also like Cody Steele on the money line at minus 225. Any other thoughts you have on that fight that you didn't get to?
I guess the only other thought is what if he ground and pounds him, or what if he just wrestles him the whole time? Look, I don't want to be directionally correct that his grappling is so much better, but he doesn't win a sub. So bet to win close to a unit on the money line, quarter unit or so sprinkle on sub, and then get paid out either way, get paid out bigly if he gets the submission.
And that'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content from both Billy and myself at actionnetwork.com. Remember, if you'd like to instantly tail some of the bets we discussed on today's show, including Francisco Prado, look for the quick slip link in the podcast and the video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all of your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening.